The Galactic Council chamber floated in the darkness of space, orbiting a dying star that pulsed with ancient light. Inside the massive structure, representatives from 847 different species gathered in a circle that stretched for miles. Some breathed oxygen, others methane. Some had bodies made of flesh, others of crystal or pure energy. They had ruled the galaxy together for 12,000 years, and in all that time, no one had ever challenged their authority. Wu stood in the center of the circle, feeling very small and very human. He wore his best suit, though it looked plain compared to the flowing robes and gleaming armor around him. His hands trembled slightly, but he kept his face calm. Behind him stood Captain and Scientist, the only other humans allowed in this place. Their ship, the waited outside in a containment field, trapped like an insect in amber. They had come in peace. Humanity had finally mastered faster-than-light travel after centuries of dreaming about the stars. That was supposed to be their proudest achievement, their first step into a larger universe. Instead, it had triggered alarms across half the galaxy. Within hours of leaving Earth's solar system, they had been surrounded by alien vessels and dragged here like criminals. A towering figure made of living crystal rose from its seat. Its voice echoed through the chamber without needing a mouth to speak. This was Counselor Al, and even the other aliens seemed to fear him. "Humans of Earth," Al announced, "you have violated the Preservation Directive. Your species was designated as protected. You were not permitted to leave your system." Wu felt anger rising in his chest, but he pushed it down. "We didn't know about any directive. This is our first time meeting anyone from beyond our world. How could we violate a rule we never heard of?" A ripple of what might have been laughter moved through parts of the assembly. Al's crystalline body flashed with colors that hurt to look at. "Ignorance is not an excuse. 200 years ago, the Empire discovered your world. The Council studied your species and made a decision. Humanity was too dangerous to be allowed into galactic society. You were violent, unpredictable, and technologically primitive. We placed monitors around your system and forbade contact. You were to be preserved in your natural state, studied but never touched. You've been watching us for 200 years, spoke up, unable to contain herself, studying us like animals in a zoo. Another alien stood, this one looking like a giant insect with too many legs. Its voice came from a translator device that hung in the air. "We protected you. Do you know how many species destroy themselves when they gain advanced technology? The Council has saved dozens of civilizations by keeping them contained until they mature. In another 1,000 years, we might have contacted you properly." Stepped forward, her pilot's instincts making her bold. "You had no right. We never asked for your protection." Al's body glowed brighter and the temperature in the chamber dropped. "Rights? You speak of rights. We are the Council. We have maintained peace in this galaxy for 12. We decide who joins civilized society and who remains in isolation. Your species shows all the signs of a chaos breed. Aggressive expansion, constant warfare, inability to unify even your own planet. You are exactly the kind of species that either conquers everything or destroys itself. We will not allow either outcome." Wu looked around the vast chamber, seeing the faces and forms of hundreds of species, all watching them with expressions he could not read. How many of them had been discovered like this? How many had been given a choice? "What happens now?" he asked quietly. Al seemed pleased by the question. "You have 3 options. First, you may surrender all faster-than-light technology and return to your world. We will increase monitoring and ensure you never leave your system again. Second, you may submit to Council oversight. We will place governors on your world, control your expansion, and gradually integrate you into galactic society over the next 500 years. Third, if you refuse both options, we will implement containment protocols." "What are containment protocols?" asked, though her face suggested she already knew the answer. A smaller alien, covered in soft fur, spoke in a gentle voice. "We would destroy your industrial capacity from orbit. Your species would be reduced to a pre-technological state. It would take you centuries to rebuild, and by then, perhaps you would have learned. The chamber fell silent. Wu felt the weight of billions of lives on his shoulders. Every human who looked up at the stars with hope and wonder. Every child who dreamed of touching the cosmos. Every scientist who had worked to make the possible. All of it could end here, with these aliens who claimed to know better than humanity what was good for them. He thought about Earth. Beautiful, terrible, complicated Earth. Yes, humans fought wars. Yes, they struggled to agree on anything. Yes, they had nearly destroyed themselves a dozen times over. But they had also created art that made people weep, music that united millions, and love that spanned generations. They had climbed from caves to cities to stars through sheer determination and refusal to accept limits. Wu looked up at Al, at the crystal giant who spoke for the council, and asked the question that had been building in his mind since this nightmare began. What gives you the right? The chamber went absolutely silent, not the silence of waiting for an answer, but the silence of shock. Al's crystalline form stopped glowing. The other counselors froze in whatever passed for surprise among their species. What did you say? Al finally asked. What gives you the right? Wu repeated louder this time. You talk about peace and protection, but you've been spying on us for 2 centuries. You talk about preventing chaos, but you threaten to bomb us back to the Stone Age if we don't obey. You talk about civilization, but you treat entire species like children who can't make their own choices. So I'm asking you, Counselor Al, representative of this ancient and powerful council, what gives you the right to decide humanity's fate? No one had an answer. They hung in space like a prisoner, wrapped in blue energy fields that prevented any movement. Inside the ship, the crew watched Earth through the windows, knowing that everyone back home was watching the news with growing fear and anger. First contact had gone wrong in the worst possible way. On Earth, Admiral sat in a war room deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, surrounded by screens showing data from across the planet. Military leaders from every nation had gathered, though many appeared only as holograms. The Admiral was a calm man with gray hair and steady hands, but his eyes showed the stress of impossible decisions. They're holding our people hostage, the American general said, his face red with anger. We should mobilize every ship we have. We have 40 military vessels, Director Sara replied from her seat at the table. She ran Earth's newly formed Interstellar Affairs Division, created just 6 months ago when humanity thought they were ready for peaceful exploration. The Council has over 100,000 ships. Their weapons can crack planets like eggs. This isn't a fight we can win with force. Admiral studied the data in silence. The Council had made their ultimatum clear. Dismantle every faster-than-light drive on Earth, accept permanent monitoring, or face orbital bombardment. They had given humanity 2 weeks to decide. Their betting will panic, said quietly. They've seen our history. They know we fight among ourselves. They expect us to fracture under pressure. So what do? The Chinese admiral asked. Looked at Director Sara, and something passed between them, a shared understanding that the others didn't see. We do what we've always done when facing impossible odds. We wait, we watch, and we prepare. On the diplomatic station where there was held, Wu sat in a small room that served as temporary quarters. The walls were wrong, designed for aliens, and the gravity felt slightly off. A soft chime announced a visitor, and the door opened to reveal a being, smaller than most of the council members he'd seen. My name is, the alien said through its translator. I am a junior counselor. I wanted to speak with you privately. Wu gestured to a seat, though he wasn't sure the alien could use it. Settled onto the floor instead, folding its many legs beneath its body. What you did in the chamber, began. No species has questioned the council like that in 3,000 years. Maybe someone should have, Wu replied. Made a clicking sound that might have been agreement. I'm not supposed to tell you this, but I believe you have a right to know. There are records in our oldest archives from before the council became what it is now. They speak of species like yours, species with strong emotions, aggressive expansion instincts, and remarkable adaptability. The records call them chaos species. That's what Al said. Yes, but the records say more. Every chaos species in galactic history has followed one of two paths. They either conquer half the galaxy, enslaving or destroying other civilizations, or they destroy themselves through war and pollution. There is no middle path recorded. None have ever joined the galactic community peacefully. Wu felt cold, so the Council eliminates them before they can do either. The official records show 14 species designated as chaos breeds over 12,000 years. All were placed under preservation directives. All were eventually neutralized when they attempted to leave their systems. Translator seemed to hesitate before adding, neutralized means eradicated. Humanity is the 15th. Why are you telling me this? Because I do not believe it is right. Because my species was once considered dangerous too. We were assimilated into the Council through force, our independence taken, our choices removed. I have lived for 300 years, and in all that time, I have watched the Council claim to pursue peace while crushing anything that threatens their control. Your question in the chamber made me remember what I had tried to forget. After left, Wu found Captain in the ship's tiny observation deck. She was watching the stars, her face reflected in the glass. I met a junior counselor, Wu said. Told me we're not the first species they've done this to. I've been making friends too, replied. One of the station technicians, a young alien named. He's scared of the senior counselors but chatty when they're not around. He told me about the Council's political structure, how decisions are really made where the power lies. This Council isn't as unified as they pretend. Information we can use. Maybe if we survive this. Join them carrying a data pad. I've been reading everything the station computers will let me access about Council biology and history. Did you know humans are the only species in the entire galactic database that evolved as persistence hunters? Every other predator species either ambushes or uses pack tactics for quick kills. We're the only ones who chase prey for days until it collapses from exhaustion. How does that help us? Asked. I don't know yet, but it means we're built differently, we think differently. The Council has never encountered a problem-solving approach like ours. They keep saying we're unpredictable, but I think it's deeper than that. We're literally wired to never give up, to keep going when every logical calculation says we should stop. Back on Earth, Admiral addressed the assembled leaders. We're going to publicly announce compliance with the Council's demands. We will dismantle our FTL drives and accept monitoring. Shock and anger erupted around the table. The Russian general stood up so fast his chair fell backward. That's surrender. That's survival, Director Sora said. But Admiral isn't finished. The Admiral touched a control and new information appeared on the screens, marked with the highest security clearance. While we publicly comply, we will activate Protocol Silent Blade. I won't explain it here because if the Council has infiltrated our communications, they cannot know what it means. Director Sora has the details. Those who need to know will be briefed individually. So we pretend to surrender, the American general asked, understanding dawning in his eyes. We've been preparing for something like this since we first detected the monitoring satellites 2 years ago, Sora explained. We just didn't know what form the threat would take. Now we do. It was released 3 days later. As Captain guided the ship away from the station, Council vessels escorted them to the edge of the system where they could safely engage their FTL drive. Wu watched the alien ships on the, wondering if this was really the end. They think they've won, said quietly. Let them think that, Wu replied. Patience isn't surrender, it's preparation. Looked up from her station. I've been thinking about what's said about chaos species either conquering or destroying themselves. What if we're not the first species like us? What if we're just the first they've met who chose a third option? What third option? Asked. I don't know yet, admitted. But we'll figure it out. That's what humans do. We adapt. As Earth came into view ahead, beautiful and blue and fragile, Admiral's final words echoed in Wu's mind from their last secured communication. Make them believe they've contained us. Then we show them what patience really means. They crossed into Earth's atmosphere to the sound of alarms and protests, a defeated ship returning home. But Wu wasn't defeated. He was planning. And somewhere in the depths of the ocean, Protocol Silent Blade had already begun. 5 years had passed since humanity's humiliation before the Galactic Council. To the galaxy's 847 civilizations, Earth appeared to have learned its lesson. Human ships traveled between stars using Council-approved drives, each vessel monitored and tracked at every jump point. Earth paid tribute in raw materials and shared scientific research as required. Humanity had been tamed. On the Council, a nervous reptilian official named reviewed shipping logs for the 100th time that week. Something felt wrong, but he couldn't identify what. He was Counselor Al's administrative aide, responsible for monitoring compliance from restricted species. The humans were following every rule, yet his instincts screamed that something was off. The human merchant vessel, he muttered to himself, scrolling through data. Departed Station Kelvin 9 with full fuel reserves. Arrived at Station Meridian 4 3 days later. Used 17% less fuel than calculations predict. His supervisor, a floating blob of luminescent gas, drifted over. Measurement error. Happens all the time. It happens with human ships constantly, not with anyone else. Pulled up more records. Their scientific data contains small errors too. Nothing major, just tiny inconsistencies that make verification difficult. And their diplomats ask the strangest questions. Such as, last week, Ambassador Wu spent an hour asking about Council military doctrine regarding supply chain logistics. Why would a restricted species care about that? The gas blob shimmered, which indicated amusement. Paranoia, you've been monitoring humans too long. They're contained, tracked, and harmless. Stop inventing problems. But couldn't stop. The wrongness followed him everywhere, like an itch he couldn't scratch. What he didn't know was that, on a human vessel called the Operative, sat in the galley with 3 other crew members who weren't really crew members at all. They were intelligence agents, and there wasn't really a merchant ship. Station surveillance mapped? Asked. Complete, replied the man across from her. We now have detailed layouts of 47 major council stations, including blind spots, security rotations, and data access points. Nodded, making notes on a tablet that would erase itself in 10 minutes. She had been undercover for 5 years, working as a translator at Council Diplomatic Station 7. She was good at languages, so no one questioned why she'd taken the job. In that time, she'd made friends, learned secrets, and most importantly, mapped every system in the Council's central bureaucracy. She wasn't alone. Hundreds of humans had quietly taken positions across Council space, janitors who saw secure areas, technicians who maintained computers, teachers who educated alien children and learned about their parents' work, kitchen staff who overheard conversations, all watching, all listening, all reporting back through channels the Council didn't know existed. On Earth, in a facility hidden beneath the mountains of Korea, Engineer stood before a prototype that had consumed 5 years of his life. It looked like a sphere of twisted metal and crystal, humming with energy that made nearby instruments go haywire. Director Sora walked around it slowly, trailed by Admiral and a dozen scientists. You're certain it works? We've run 300 simulations and 20 small-scale tests, replied. His hands shook slightly, not from fear but from exhaustion and excitement. It doesn't violate Council regulations because it doesn't use faster-than-light technology as the Council understands it. It's not a warp drive or a jump drive or anything in their databases. Explain it simply, Admiral requested. Took a breath. The Council's technology moves ships through space very fast. Our technology doesn't move ships at all. It manipulates quantum probability fields to make a ship exist in a different location. The ship doesn't travel. It just stops being here and starts being there. Instantaneous? Sora asked. Nearly. The mathematics are complicated, but yes. And more importantly, it leaves no signature that Council sensors can detect because they're not looking for probability manipulation. They're looking for energy spikes and dimensional tiers. Admiral studied the device. How many of these do we have? We've built 600 and installed them in the Shadow Fleet. The Shadow Fleet was Admiral's secret, a fleet built in hidden shipyards on the far side of Earth's moon and in asteroid facilities that officially didn't exist. While humanity appeared to have only 40 outdated military vessels, they actually had 500 cutting-edge ships that Council satellites had never detected. In the Council chambers, Wu played his role perfectly. He had been Earth's permanent ambassador for 5 years, always cooperative, always deferential, always seemingly beaten. He attended every session, voted as the Council suggested, and smiled politely when Counselor Al reminded everyone of humanity's restricted status. Today, Al made an announcement that sent cold fear through Wu's chest, though his face remained calm. The Council has decided to establish a cultural preservation center, Al declared. We will relocate 10,000 humans from Earth to a dedicated world where they can be properly studied and protected. This will help us better understand your species and guide your development. Earth has 1 month to select appropriate candidates. Wu stood slowly. Counselor, with respect, this sounds like you're asking us to select prisoners. Not prisoners, participants in an important scientific endeavor. Against their will. The Council has decided Earth will comply. Wu sat back down, but his hand went to his pocket, where he pressed a button on a device that looked like an ordinary communicator. The signal it sent was brief and encoded, traveling through 17 relay points to reach Earth. Director Sora received the message in her office. She read it once, then looked at Admiral, who had been waiting for this moment for 5 years. They've gone too far, she said quietly. Yes, agreed, it's time. He picked up a phone that connected to no network, that used quantum entanglement to communicate with specific receivers across the solar system. He spoke 4 words. Activate Silent Blade. Across human space, people who had been waiting for 5 years received their orders. Operative in her translator's office, engineer at his quantum device, captain at a hidden military base. Hundreds more in positions the Council never suspected. Scientists sat in her laboratory on Earth, surrounded by research that had earned her respect across the galaxy. Her papers on xenobiology were published in the most prestigious journals, read by thousands of alien scholars. What they didn't know was that every paper contained hidden data, innocent-seeming observations that were actually intelligence about alien biology, physiology, and potential vulnerabilities. She had spent 5 years creating a database of every Council species' weaknesses, disguised as academic curiosity. She received the activation signal and began the final stage of her work, distributing the real analysis to human military commanders. On Station Meridian 4, finally found the evidence he'd been seeking. A human technician had made a small error in erasing their tracks, and he discovered it in the repair logs. Humans had been accessing secure systems, copying data they shouldn't have, mapping things they had no reason to know about. He rushed to Counselor Al's office, data pad in hand, ready to reveal the truth, but when he arrived, the office was in chaos. Screens showed impossible readings from across Council space. Human vessels were disappearing from tracking systems. Communication networks were failing. Station after station reported system errors. Al turned to, his crystalline body glowing with something that might have been fear. What is happening? looked at his data pad at the evidence of human infiltration, and realized they had been 5 years too late. "I think," he said quietly, "humanity has been playing a much longer game than we realized." In the command center beneath the Pacific Ocean, Admiral watched screens showing 500 ships appearing on sensors across the galaxy, in positions they couldn't possibly have reached. He allowed himself a small smile. "Patience," he said to no one in particular, "is the most dangerous weapon in the universe." The Council's primary shipyard orbited a gas giant in the Arcturus sector, home to 2,000 vessels under construction and 10,000 more in various stages of maintenance. It was the military heart of galactic civilization, protected by sensor networks that could detect a child's toy at 10 light years. Those sensors detected nothing as 500 human ships simply appeared in orbit around the shipyard, surrounding it completely. They didn't arrive. They didn't travel. One moment the space was empty, the next it was filled with vessels broadcasting human identification codes. Alarms screamed across the shipyard. Alien workers abandoned their posts in panic. Defense systems powered up, searching for targeting locks on the human ships, but the targeting computers couldn't establish locks on vessels they insisted weren't there. The ships existed visually, appeared on basic cameras, but to every advanced sensor and targeting system in the Council's arsenal, that space was empty. Fleet Commander stood on the bridge of the Soul, the flagship of humanity's shadow fleet. He was a quiet man who had spent 5 years preparing for this moment, running simulations, training crews, and perfecting tactics that no alien force had ever encountered because humans fought wars differently than anyone else in the galaxy. "Do not fire," he ordered calmly. "Maintain position. Broadcast the message on all frequencies." The message was simple, delivered in 847 languages simultaneously. "We are here. We do not wish to fight, but we will no longer be contained." On Station Meridian 4, Operative sat at her translator's desk as chaos erupted around her. Council officials ran through hallways, shouting orders in languages that her translator device could barely keep up with. She smiled slightly and pressed a button hidden beneath her desk. Across the station, carefully placed programs activated. Security cameras looped old footage. Door locks responded to override codes. Communication systems began routing through servers that humans controlled. The station didn't know it yet, but it belonged to humanity now. Stood up, walked calmly to the station commander's office, and the door opened for her because the station no longer recognized the difference between a translator and an admiral. The commander, a being that looked like a walking tree, turned in surprise. "How did you get in here? I locked that door." "You did," agreed. "5 years ago when I started working here, your security seemed very impressive, but I've had a lot of time to learn. We all have." Similar scenes played out across 200 stations. Human workers revealed themselves as operatives. Systems that had seemed secure fell to infiltrators who had spent years in place. The Council's vast bureaucracy discovered that humans had been embedded everywhere, in every department, every facility, every system that mattered. In the Council chambers, Counselor Al's crystalline body blazed with colors that indicated rage and fear. Around him, 846 other counselors demanded answers, threatened action, and tried to understand how a restricted species had accomplished the impossible. "Order our fleets to engage the human vessels," Al commanded. A military coordinator, something like a crab made of metal, manipulated holographic displays with its claws. "Sir, we cannot target them. They don't register on our weapon systems. We can see them, but we cannot lock onto them. It's as if they're ghosts." "Then fire blind. Fill the space where they are with weapons." "If we do that near our own shipyards, we'll destroy our own facilities." Al turned to his communication officer. "Order all stations to remove human infiltrators immediately." "We've tried, sir. Our security systems are compromised. We can't tell who is where. Our own databases are corrupted with false information. Some stations report that their life support systems are under human control. If we act against the humans, they might shut down atmosphere generation. That's terrorism. That's leverage, said a calm voice from the chamber entrance. Wu walked in without being announced, without being escorted, because the chamber's security had been programmed 5 years ago by a human technician who no longer worked there. He walked to the center of the circle, to the same spot where he had stood 5 years before, humiliated and threatened. He looked different now, older, tired, but no longer afraid. You demanded we select 10,000 people to be taken from Earth and imprisoned, Wu said quietly. That was a mistake. Al's body flared brightly. You dare threaten the council? No, I'm explaining what has already happened. You gave us 2 choices 5 years ago, submit or be destroyed. We chose a third option. We made you irrelevant. Captain stood at the tactical station aboard the Soul, watching readouts that showed council military responses. Ships were moving to intercept human vessels, but every time they tried to coordinate, their communications failed. Every time they plotted courses, their navigation systems developed errors. Every time they tried to organize, the vast machinery of council logistics fell apart. They're trying to mobilize their third fleet, her tactical officer reported. But the supply depot at Station Kelvin 9 just reported that all its fuel reserves are somehow contaminated with impurities. They can't refuel. Nodded. 5 years of preparation meant that humans knew where every supply depot was, every fuel reserve, every spare parts warehouse. They had quietly introduced tiny errors into inventory systems, moved decimal points in fuel calculations, and corrupted replacement schedules. Nothing big enough to notice during routine operations, but enough to make rapid military mobilization impossible. The Council spent 12,000 years building a galaxy-spanning civilization, said to her crew, and they built it on technology and systems that we've spent 5 years learning to break. They're not bad at what they do. They're just playing a game they understand. We're playing a different game entirely. In her laboratory on Earth, scientists pressed the button that released her final research paper to the Galactic Academic Network. This one wasn't disguised. This one laid out everything she had learned in 5 years of study. The paper detailed the Council's Preservation Directive Program. It listed the 14 species that had been designated as dangerous and subsequently eliminated. It provided genetic data, cultural information, and historical records of civilizations that no longer existed because the Council had decided they were too risky to allow into galactic society. Most damning, it showed the pattern. Every 60 to 80 years, the Council discovered a new dangerous species. Every time they eliminated it. Every time the resources from that species entered Council control. The preservation program wasn't about protection. It was about elimination and exploitation. The paper spread across the galactic network in minutes. Billions of aliens read it, and many began to question what they had always accepted as truth. On Station Meridian 4 broadcast a message to all human operatives. Phase 2 complete, holding position, await further orders. In the council chambers, Counselor stood up, his body trembling. He had been silent for 5 years, watching and waiting. Now he spoke. Counselor Al, I move that we negotiate with humanity. Negotiate, they have attacked us. They have outmaneuvered us, corrected. There is a difference. They hold positions throughout our civilization. They control systems we depend on. And they have done all of this without firing a single shot or killing a single being. That shows more restraint than we showed them when we threatened to bomb their world. Other counselors began to murmur agreement. Not all, but enough. Wu stepped forward. Admiral sends a message. You have 24 hours to negotiate. If you refuse, humanity will not attack you. We won't have to. We'll simply shut down every system we've infiltrated, every program we've corrupted, every network we've penetrated. Your civilization will experience paralysis. Ships won't move. Stations won't function. Supply chains will collapse. We won't destroy you. We'll just stop helping you function. Al's body had stopped glowing. For the first time in 5 years, the ancient counselor seemed uncertain. You couldn't have done all of this. Impossible. You underestimated us, Wu replied. You saw a species that fought among itself and assumed we were weak. You didn't understand that the same passion that makes us fight makes us determined. You saw that we couldn't unify our planet and assumed we couldn't cooperate. You didn't realize that we unify just fine when facing an outside threat. You called us chaos, but you forgot that chaos is unpredictable, creative, and adaptable. You tried to contain the one species in the galaxy that evolved to never give up, to pursue impossible goals until we achieved them. He looked around the chamber, at the faces and forms of 847 species, and spoke the words that would change everything. We stayed silent for 5 years. We let you believe you had won, but Earth does not surrender. Earth endures, and now we're done being patient. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been going for 16 hours. Counselor Al's crystalline body had dimmed to a dull gray, and even the most energetic species representatives showed signs of exhaustion. They had tried every argument, every threat, every diplomatic maneuver they knew. Nothing worked. Humanity had infiltrated so deeply into galactic civilization that removing them would cause total collapse. The Council couldn't win militarily against an enemy they couldn't target. They couldn't restore their systems without human cooperation, because humans had spent 5 years becoming essential to those systems. They had checkmated the most powerful authority in the galaxy without firing a single shot. Counselor finally spoke, his voice tired but determined. We must negotiate. There is no other rational choice. We do not negotiate with restricted species, Al insisted, but his words lacked conviction. They are no longer restricted, replied. They cannot be restricted. Either we accept them as equals or we watch galactic civilization crumble. Those are our only options. A vote was called. It took 3 hours of debate, but finally, by a margin of 492 to 355, the Council agreed to formal negotiations with humanity. Wu sat across from a committee of 20 senior counselors in a room designed for peaceful discussion. Director Sora sat beside him, along with Admiral who had traveled from Earth for this historic moment. Behind them, Captain and Scientist waited as advisors. State your terms, Al said coldly. Wu opened a document that had been prepared by Earth's finest legal minds, working in consultation with and other sympathetic counselors. First, the Preservation Directive Program is ended permanently. No species may be contained against their will. No civilization may be destroyed or forcibly regressed because you fear what they might become. Murmurs of disagreement ran through the counselors, but raised a claw for silence. Continue. Second, the 14 species that were eliminated under the Preservation Directive must be acknowledged. Memorials must be built. Their loss must be remembered. They were dangerous, Al protested. They were afraid, spoke up. I've read every record I could find. Most of them were simply scared species trying to survive. Some were aggressive, yes, but others were just different from what you expected. You eliminated them because they didn't fit your idea of civilized behavior. Third, Admiral continued, the Council must be reformed. It can no longer be an authoritarian body that makes decisions for the galaxy. It must become a true representative democracy where all species have equal voices. The room erupted in protests. Al stood, his body blazing with angry light. You ask us to dismantle 12,000 years of peace and stability. You call it peace, Sora said quietly. Others call it oppression. We've spoken to dozens of species over the past 5 years. Many feel the way does. They join the council through force or fear, not choice. They follow your rules because they have no alternative. You've created stability by crushing anything that threatens your control. Director Sora stood and activated a holographic display. It showed data from surveys that human operatives had conducted across hundreds of worlds. 63% of council species would prefer more autonomy. 48% have cultural practices they've hidden because the council disapproves. 31% have considered leaving the council but fear retaliation. You don't have unity. You have compliance maintained through fear. And fourth, Wu said, drawing their attention back, humanity will maintain its shadow fleet. We will share our quantum probability technology with the galaxy, but we will keep enough ships to defend ourselves if the Council ever decides that we're too dangerous again. That's insurance against us, one counselor observed, a being made of liquid metal. Yes, Wu agreed. We trust in verification, not faith. You've already shown us what you do to species you fear. We won't give you the chance to do it again. Al called for a vote to reject the terms and accept whatever consequences came. The vote failed by a wide margin. Too many species had watched humanity accomplish the impossible and realized that if humans could do it, perhaps other changes were possible too. The certainty that had held the council together for 12 was cracking. The negotiations took another week. Terms were refined, compromises made, language adjusted. In the end, a document was signed that fundamentally changed galactic civilization. The Preservation Directive was abolished. A memorial station was commissioned to honor the lost species. The council structure was reformed to give smaller species more representation, and Earth's status changed from restricted species to full council member with all rights and privileges. Humanity agreed to withdraw most of their operatives from council systems, share their new technology, and work toward peaceful integration. But they kept their shadow fleet. An admiral made it clear that any future threats would be met with the same patience and preparation that had defeated the council. 5 years after the reforms, the council chambers looked different. The circular authority structure had been replaced with an open forum where representatives from all species could speak. Human architectural designs mixed with alien aesthetics, creating something new and strange and beautiful. Wu, now much older and officially retired from diplomatic service, stood before the assembly as an honored guest. A newly contacted species had just achieved faster-than-light travel and appeared at the edges of council space. They were primitive by galactic standards, aggressive in their expansion, emotionally volatile. The old council would have issued a preservation directive immediately. Wu watched as younger diplomats debated the correct approach. Some urged caution, others suggested monitoring. But then Captain, who now served as humanity's primary representative, stood to speak. I propose we greet them as friends, not subjects. Let them stumble. Let them learn. Let them surprise us. Every species deserves the chance to find their own path, even if it's different from what we expect. The greatest discoveries happen when we stop trying to control everything and start trusting in possibility. The vote passed overwhelmingly. First contact protocols were established that emphasized cooperation over control, assistance over containment. Engineers' quantum probability drives had revolutionized galactic travel. Trade expanded rapidly, reaching parts of the galaxy the Council had never properly explored because their old FTL technology was too slow. Humanity became a hub of innovation, drawing scientists from hundreds of worlds to Earth's research facilities. Scientists ran the Institute of Understanding, where species learned about each other through genuine exchange rather than study from afar. Her papers were still published, but now they were collaborative efforts involving researchers from dozens of civilizations. Operative and her network had transitioned from intelligence gathering to cultural liaison work, helping humanity integrate peacefully into galactic society, while maintaining the vigilance that had saved them once before. On Earth, Director Sora sat in a garden overlooking the ocean, retired at last after a decade of intense work. A young person approached her, a student working on a thesis about first contact. "How did we win?" the student asked. Sora smiled, looking at the stars that were just becoming visible in the evening sky. "We didn't win. Winning implies someone else had to lose. We just refused to accept the options they gave us. They said submit or be destroyed. We said no to both and created a third choice." But how? They were so much more powerful. Power isn't just about weapons or numbers. It's about will, creativity, and patience. They had weapons, yes, but we had something they'd never encountered: 5 billion years of evolutionary history that taught us never to give up. We evolved as persistence hunters. We chased prey across continents until it collapsed from exhaustion. We applied that same persistence to surviving in a hostile galaxy. The student made notes, then asked, "What if another species threatens us? What if someone more dangerous than the Council appears?" "Then we'll do what we've always done," Sora replied. "We'll watch, we'll learn, we'll adapt, and we'll survive. That's what humanity does. We survive." Above Earth, they orbited as a museum ship, maintained by volunteers who remembered when it had been humanity's first and only interstellar vessel. On its hull, beside the identification numbers and flags, a new plaque had been installed. Visitors from across the galaxy came to read it, to understand the species that had changed everything. The plaque read, "Earth stayed silent until silence was no longer enough." In the council chambers, now truly a place of equals rather than rulers and subjects, representatives debated the challenges of their era: climate change on multiple worlds, economic inequality between species, cultural preservation versus modernization, the same problems that had always existed but now approached with cooperation rather than control. Ancient and respected often sat with human representatives, sharing stories of the old days and marveling at how much had changed. One day, he asked Wu's successor, a young diplomat named Bora, the question that had haunted him for years. Did Admiral plan all of this from the beginning? The infiltration, the shadow fleet, everything? Bora smiled. "The Admiral once told me that he didn't plan to change the galaxy. He just planned to save humanity. Everything else was improvisation, adaptation, and people making the best choices they could with incomplete information. That's what makes us dangerous, counselor. Not that we plan everything perfectly, but that we refuse to stop trying even when the plan falls apart." Clicked his mandibles in what might have been laughter. "The council feared you would conquer or destroy. Instead, you forced us to change. I'm not sure which outcome is more frightening to people like Al." "Change is always frightening," Bora agreed. "But it's necessary. The galaxy was stagnant. You'd achieved peace by eliminating anything that threatened it. Real peace requires accepting that others might do things differently." Far from the political centers, on a quiet agricultural world that humanity had helped terraform, farmers from 3 different species worked together to develop crops that could grow in multiple environments. Children of 6 different civilizations played together in schools where differences were celebrated rather than feared. This was the galaxy humanity had fought for, not through conquest or destruction, but through patience, preparation, and the stubborn refusal to accept that things had to stay the way they were. Admiral passed away at the age of 93, surrounded by family and honored by every species in the galaxy. At his funeral, representatives from 847 civilizations came to pay respects to the man who had changed everything by refusing to fight the war his enemies expected. His final recorded words, preserved for history, were simple: "We stayed silent until we were ready. We prepared until patience became power. And we showed the galaxy that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to be what others expect you to be." The galaxy moved forward, imperfect and chaotic, but free in ways it had never been before. Species made their own choices, pursued their own paths, and sometimes failed spectacularly. But they also succeeded in ways the old council had never imagined possible. And Earth, the world that had stayed silent until silence was no longer enough, continued to spin through space, home to a species that had learned the greatest lesson of all. True strength isn't about domination or control. It's about endurance, adaptation, and the courage to challenge injustice, even when every logical calculation says you should surrender. The stars watched, as they always had, as humanity and their galactic neighbors wrote a new chapter in the story of civilization. A chapter where patience proved more powerful than weapons, where preparation defeated force, and where a species that refused to give up changed the galaxy forever.